I built my business from the ground up. I wasn't some trust fund baby handed a cushy startup. I worked for it. Long nights, missed vacations, blood, sweat, and way too many tears went into Parker Designs. My fashion line had started as a dream in my tiny apartment, stitching samples by hand and pitching to investors who wouldn't even give me a second glance. But I made it. I built a company that was thriving, creating stunning, high-quality garments, and had finally landed a major contract with Collins Retail, a deal that was set to double our revenue over the next 3 years. And then Michael, my husband, my supposed partner in everything, stabbed me in the back. It was supposed to be a routine company meeting, just a quarterly update with all the key team members. I walked into the conference room, coffee in hand, ready to go over production numbers and marketing strategies. But the second I stepped inside, I knew something was off. For starters, Michael was already there, standing at the head of the table. That wasn't unusual. He worked in the business too, overseeing operations while I handled the creative side. But the look on his face? Smug. Too smug. Like he was enjoying a joke I wasn't in on. And then, there was her. Lauren Mitchell, sitting just to his left, a glossy-haired, overconfident snake in a designer dress that I recognized because I designed it. She worked in marketing, and I had always gotten a weird vibe from her, too flirty, too eager to be near Michael. But I had trusted him. That trust was about to shatter. Michael cleared his throat and smiled at me, a tight, rehearsed smile that set off every alarm bell in my head. "Emily," he said smoothly, "take a seat. We have some exciting changes to discuss." I sat slowly, eyes scanning the room. Everyone looked tense, shifting in their seats. My employees, people who had been with me since the early days, couldn't meet my eyes. Michael continued. "After careful consideration, we've decided that Parker Designs needs a new creative vision to keep up with industry trends. Effective immediately, Lauren will be taking over as creative director." Silence. And then, he kept going. "We also believe that, moving forward, a leadership restructuring is in the best interest of the company. Which is why, as of today, you'll be stepping down." I blinked. Once. Twice. The words didn't make sense. Stepping down? My company? My company? Michael was still talking, droning on about new directions and fresh perspectives, but I couldn't hear him over the roaring in my ears. Then Lauren, with her smug little smirk, finally spoke. "We really appreciate everything you've done, Emily," she said in a voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But Michael and I have big plans. The board agrees that you've become too emotionally attached to the brand." Too emotionally attached? To my own company? I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, my fingers digging into the arms of my chair. They were trying to force me out. Right here. In front of my own employees. And then Michael delivered the final blow. "To make things easier, we've already arranged the legal paperwork. If you sign now, we can ensure a generous severance package and a smooth transition." He slid a folder across the table. A legal document. My forced resignation. That's when it hit me. This wasn't spur of the moment. This had been planned. For months. Michael wasn't just betraying me, he was stealing my entire life's work. And Lauren? His new creative director? She wasn't just a colleague. She was his mistress. I knew. Oh, I had known for weeks. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the urgent business trips that just so happened to align with Lauren's schedule. I wasn't stupid. And if they thought for 1 second that I was going to sit there, sign away my company, and slink away quietly, they had another thing coming. I took a deep breath. Let the silence stretch. Let them think I was cornered, that I had no way out. Then, slowly, I smiled. "Wow," I said, my voice sickly sweet. "You really thought this through, didn't you?" Michael relaxed, mistaking my calm for surrender. Lauren sat back, smug. "Of course," Michael said. "It's for the best." I reached for the folder, flipped it open, and then laughed. Laughed so hard that the entire room flinched. I could see it then, the first flicker of doubt in Michael's eyes. The first crack in Lauren's confidence. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, shaking my head. "You have no idea what's coming." Because while they had been plotting behind my back, thinking they were so clever, I had been watching, waiting, preparing. And this? This was just the beginning. I walked out of that boardroom with my head held high, leaving Michael and Lauren basking in their premature victory. They thought they had won. They thought I was cornered, that I'd be humiliated, broken, and forced to crawl away while they gutted everything I had built. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I had seen this coming months ago. And I had already started laying the groundwork for their downfall. Because here's the thing, men like Michael, they think they're smart. They think they're clever. They think women, especially the ones who built the very foundation they stand on, are too emotional, too naive, too fragile to fight back. Michael had underestimated me. And it was going to cost him everything. I never used to be the kind of person who checked my partner's phone. I believed in trust, in honesty in us. I thought we were building something together. But something had changed in Michael over the past year. At first, it was little things, the sudden late meetings, the unexplained credit card charges, the way he turned his phone screen away when I walked into the room. And then, there was Lauren. She had always been ambitious. I respected that. Hell, I encouraged it. I had hired her myself 2 years ago, thinking she was just another talented marketing executive looking for a place to shine. But then, she started showing up everywhere. Late-night drinks with Michael. Private meetings. Business trips that should have involved me but somehow never did. And the way her eyes lingered just a little too long when she thought I wasn't looking. So, I started paying attention. And when I finally did check Michael's phone one night while he was in the shower, I found everything I needed. The messages. The late-night rendezvous. The plans. Oh, the plans. Michael wasn't just cheating on me. He and Lauren had been orchestrating my removal from my own company for months. And the worst part? They were using my own money to do it. That's when I started digging. I went through every account, every invoice, every transaction. And I saw it, clear as day. Money being funneled into shell companies. Payments being rerouted to accounts I hadn't authorized. Massive investments into a holding firm under a name I didn't recognize. Michael thought he was so slick, but he forgot one thing. I built this company from nothing. I knew where every single dollar was supposed to be. And when I found something that didn't add up, I followed it. That's how I found the real plan. Michael and Lauren weren't just trying to push me out. They were using company funds to secretly acquire controlling shares of Parker Designs through a third-party entity, a firm they thought was owned by an external investor. But that's where their arrogance became their downfall. You see, Michael never really understood the business world. Not the way I did. He thought he could use under-the-table deals and fake contracts to quietly buy me out of my own company. What he didn't know was that I had already been one step ahead. With the help of my lawyer, Rachel, a woman so sharp she could slice a man's ego in half with a single glance, I had created my own shell company. A silent investor, hidden under layers of legal protections. And guess what? That was the very same company Michael and Lauren had been funneling money into, thinking they were setting up their takeover. In other words, they were handing me control of my own company without even knowing it. Rachel had nearly fallen out of her chair laughing when we confirmed the final transactions. "You realize what this means, right?" she had said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Michael and Lauren are about to walk into their own trap." And I had smiled. Let them. The night before the big transition meeting that Michael had scheduled, I watched from my office window as he and Lauren celebrated. They had gone out to dinner, some ridiculously overpriced steakhouse downtown. I imagined them laughing over their expensive wine, thinking about the empire they were about to rule. Michael had no idea that by tomorrow morning, he'd be the one begging for scraps. I went home, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and raised it in a silent toast. Not to revenge. Not to hatred. But to justice. Because Michael had never understood what it meant to build something from the ground up. He had never felt the weight of responsibility, the late nights, the sacrifices. He had only ever coasted on my hard work. And tomorrow, He was going to learn exactly what happens when you try to steal from the wrong woman. I slept like a baby. I arrived at Parker Designs early, dressed in my best power suit, coffee in hand, completely unbothered. I had already spoken to the board members. The real ones, the ones who still held loyalty to me, the actual founder of the company. I had already prepared the legal documents. I had already secured my position. So when I walked into that conference room and saw Michael's smug face as he leaned back in my chair, I smiled. "Emily," he greeted, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Glad you could make it. We have a lot to discuss." Lauren was beside him, practically glowing with victory. I took my seat, crossed my legs, took a slow sip of coffee. "Oh, don't worry," I said, setting my cup down. "I already know exactly what's about to happen." And the best part? The conference room was packed when I stepped inside. Michael had called this meeting himself, expecting a smooth transition of power, now that I had supposedly been ousted. He had invited the department heads, the financial team, and even a few select members of the board to witness his glorious moment. What he didn't know, he was about to have the most humiliating morning of his life. I walked in with a quiet confidence, my heels clicking against the polished floor, my tailored navy blue suit making me look every bit the CEO I still was. I took my seat at the far end of the table, opposite Michael and Lauren, and crossed my legs as I set my coffee down in front of me. I could feel the tension in the air, the nervous glances from my employees, people who had built this company alongside me and weren't quite sure how to react to what they had been told. Michael sat at the head of the table, my seat, looking utterly smug. Lauren was beside him, practically glowing, her fingers resting on the edge of the table as if she could already feel the power at her fingertips. "Good morning, everyone," Michael began, folding his hands together like some wise leader addressing his kingdom. "As you all know, today marks a new chapter for Parker Designs. A fresh start. After much discussion, Emily has agreed to step down." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "I never agreed to that." Silence. Michael blinked at me, his smirk faltering just slightly. "Emily," he said with forced patience, as if speaking to a child. "We discussed this yesterday. Your resignation is already in the paperwork. There's no need to make this more difficult than it has to be." Lauren, for her part, had the audacity to smile. I smiled back, slow and deliberate. "See, that's where you're mistaken," I said, leaning forward just slightly. "You assumed I had no choice. That I would just accept what you and Lauren did." I tilted my head. "But here's the thing, Michael. You don't actually own this company." Confusion flickered across his face, but he quickly masked it. "Emily, let's not." "No, let's," I interrupted, reaching into my leather portfolio and pulling out my documents. "Because I think everyone here deserves to know exactly what's been happening behind the scenes." I turned to the department heads, the financial officers, the board members, my people, who had stood by me since the beginning. For months now, Michael and Lauren have been secretly funneling company funds into a third-party holding firm, intending to buy me out of my own business. I let that sink in before adding, and the worst part? They were using our money to do it. Gasps. Murmurs. I could see my employees shifting in their seats, some glancing at Michael, others at Lauren, waiting for their response. Michael scoffed. "That's ridiculous. You're grasping at straws, Emily." I didn't even look at him. Instead, I turned to Rachel, my lawyer, who had been sitting silently at the end of the table. She straightened in her chair, flipping open a folder filled with legal documents. "Actually," Rachel said, her voice calm but firm, "it's all right here. Every transaction. Every unauthorized transfer. Every single illegal move you made." She slid the documents down the table. Michael reached for them, his hands tightening as he scanned the pages, his face slowly draining of color. Lauren peered over his shoulder, her expression shifting from amusement to pure, unfiltered panic. "That holding firm you thought you were using?" I continued. "I own it." Dead silence. I let the words hang in the air, savoring the way Michael's jaw clenched, The way Lauren's breath hitched as realization dawned. "You weren't buying me out," I said, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "You were handing me more control." One of the board members, an older gentleman who had been skeptical of Michael from the start, cleared his throat. "Is this true, Michael?" Michael was seething, his hands gripping the papers so tightly they crumpled. This is a misunderstanding. Emily is twisting things." Rachel tapped a finger on the legal documents. "Actually, it's all legally binding. Every wire transfer, every share purchase, every falsified expense report. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's corporate fraud." Lauren made a strangled noise in the back of her throat. Michael, for the first time since this coup began, looked genuinely afraid. "You can't do this," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. I tilted my head. "Oh, but I can. And I already did." I turned to the financial team. Effective immediately, Michael Parker and Lauren Mitchell are barred from accessing any company assets. Their credentials have been revoked, and security has been notified to ensure they don't remove any company property. Lauren shot to her feet. "You can't just..." Rachel raised a brow. "We can, and we did. You should really read the fine print before you try to play corporate chess with the person who wrote the rulebook." Michael was staring at me, breathing heavily, his fists clenched. "Now," I said, clasping my hands together, enjoying this moment, "you both have two choices. You can either resign immediately and sign the non-compete agreements." I gestured toward the documents Rachel had prepared in advance. "Or we can pursue legal action." Lauren looked like she was about to cry. Michael looked like he wanted to flip the table over. "Legal action for what?" he hissed. Rachel smiled. "Forgery, fraud, misuse of company funds." And she glanced at the papers, flipping a page as if she hadn't already memorized every word. "Several very interesting emails detailing your plan to remove Emily, which I'm sure a judge would love to see." Michael and Lauren were trapped. I saw the exact moment they realized it. The moment all their carefully laid plans crumbled right in front of them. Michael swallowed hard. "I want to talk to my lawyer." Rachel nodded. "By all means. But I suggest you move quickly. If you don't sign those resignations within the next hour, we'll be escalating this to criminal charges." Lauren turned to Michael, her eyes wild with panic. "Michael." And right then, I knew. They were done. I leaned back, taking a slow sip of my coffee, savoring every second. Michael sat there, frozen, staring at the papers in front of him like they might suddenly burst into flames. His hands were clenched so tightly that I half expected to hear the crumple of expensive fabric as his carefully curated corporate image shattered in real time. Lauren, on the other hand, looked like she was teetering on the edge of a full-blown meltdown. Her hands were shaking, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the table as her mind raced, trying to find a way out of this mess. But there was no way out. I had them. Completely. Michael's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. This is blackmail." Rachel, bless her, my absolute legal powerhouse, didn't even look up from the documents. She simply adjusted her glasses and smiled. "No, Michael. This is corporate law. There's a difference." Lauren turned to him, her voice frantic. "Michael, do something." "What do you want me to do, Lauren?" he snapped, finally losing the last thread of his composure. "She's already won." I took my time. I let them stew in their misery for just a little longer, savoring the way their confidence had completely collapsed. And then I spoke, my voice steady, commanding. "You have two choices," I said, tapping a manicured finger against the resignation papers sitting in front of them. "You sign these, walk away quietly, and in exchange, I won't press charges for corporate fraud. Or," I leaned forward just slightly, letting the weight of my next words sink in, "I let the authorities know exactly what you've done. And I promise you, Michael, white-collar criminals don't do well in prison." Michael flinched, but I wasn't done. "If you really want to push this, I'll take you both to court. And once the media catches wind that the former CEO of Parker Designs tried to embezzle company funds while screwing his subordinate, Your reputation will be destroyed. Lauren paled. Michael swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. He turned to me, his jaw tightening. You wouldn't. I raised an eyebrow. Try me. Silence stretched across the boardroom. No one spoke. The department heads, the financial officers, the board members, they were all watching. Waiting. Michael exhaled sharply and reached for the pen. His hand hovered over the resignation line, his pride warring with his fear. But fear won. He signed. One sharp, angry stroke of ink across the paper. Lauren hesitated for half a second longer, her eyes darting between me and Michael, still clinging to the delusion that there was a way out. There wasn't. Sign it, Michael growled. She did. And just like that, they were done. Rachel collected the documents, checked each signature, and nodded. That concludes our business here. I smiled, slow and victorious. Security is waiting outside to escort you both out of the building. Lauren looked like she wanted to cry. Michael looked like he wanted to murder me. Neither of them spoke as they stood and walked toward the door, their shoulders tense, their movements stiff. As they passed me, Michael turned, his voice low and venomous. You're going to regret this, Emily. I met his gaze, unflinching. I never regret protecting what's mine. Then I turned my back on him. The ultimate dismissal. Lauren's heels clicked rapidly against the floor as she hurried after him, and just like that, they were gone. But I wasn't done yet. The moment the door closed behind them, I turned to my employees, the people who had built this company with me, the people Michael and Lauren had tried to manipulate into turning against me. And I set the record straight. I know this has been a confusing couple of weeks, I said, my voice steady, my posture unshakable. You were told that I was leaving. That Parker Designs was going in a new direction. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. The truth is, Michael and Lauren attempted a hostile takeover. They tried to push me out and steal everything we've built together. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some employees already knew. Some had suspected. But now it was out in the open. I continued. But they failed, I said, letting my gaze sweep across the room, making eye contact with every department head, every senior team member. Because this company isn't built on deception. It's built on hard work, creativity, and the people in this room. And as long as I'm in charge, it will never be run by greed or betrayal. A few people started clapping, then more, until the entire room erupted in applause. Rachel smirked at me from across the table. Damn, she muttered under her breath. That was a hell of a speech. I smiled. Just wait. I'm not done yet. Because now? It was time to make my changes. The first thing I did was announce company-wide bonuses. Every single employee, from my designers to my assistants, was getting a 5% bonus on their next paycheck. Morale? Instantly through the roof. Then I secured the biggest contract of my career, the Collins retail deal. A deal that Michael had completely ignored in favor of his little coup. I personally called the CEO, assured him that Parker Designs was stronger than ever, and by the end of the day, a multi-million-dollar contract was signed. And as for Michael? Well, let's just say the business world is small. I made sure every major investor, every industry executive, and every high-level fashion buyer knew exactly what he tried to pull. And with my connections? His name was poison in the industry within a week. Lauren? She vanished from the corporate world altogether. Turns out, no one wants to hire the woman who tried, and failed, to sleep her way into power. As for me, I stood at the top of my company. Stronger, smarter, untouchable. Because at the end of the day, Michael never understood one simple truth. When you build something with your own hands, when you earn every inch of success, when you fight for what's yours, no one can take it away from you. The day after Michael and Lauren were escorted out of the building, I called an all-hands meeting. Every single employee, designers, marketers, warehouse workers, finance, IT, everyone was called into the main floor of our headquarters. There was a nervous energy in the air. People had seen Michael storm out. They'd watched Lauren dissolve into panic tears as she realized she'd lost everything. And now, they were all waiting for an explanation. I stepped up onto the small stage we used for company-wide announcements. The murmur of voices died down as I picked up the microphone. I took a breath. Then, I told them everything. I laid it out plainly, how Michael and Lauren had tried to push me out, how they had used company funds to orchestrate a hostile takeover, and how they failed spectacularly. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't soften the edges. I wanted every single person in that room to understand what had happened. And then I said the words that sent a ripple of relief through the crowd. They're gone. For good. A second of silence. Then, thunderous applause. Some people cheered. Others clapped so hard they practically shook the walls. A few employees had to physically restrain themselves from shouting, "Good riddance," because, yeah, that's how much Michael and Lauren were hated behind the scenes. Once the applause died down, I continued. "I know that uncertainty can shake a company," I said, meeting their gazes one by one. "And I know many of you have been worried about your jobs, about the direction of Parker Designs, about whether we'll survive this storm. So let me be clear, we are not in danger. We are stronger than ever. And to prove it," I paused for dramatic effect, "I'm increasing salaries by 10% across the board." If I thought the applause was loud before, I was wrong. This time, the entire company erupted into cheers. A few people even looked like they might cry. But I wasn't done yet. And I added, "Because I know how hard you all work, because I know that this company is nothing without its people, I'm implementing an annual bonus structure. If Parker Designs hits its revenue goals, every employee gets a share of that success." I watched as stunned faces turned into absolute joy. This was what real leadership looked like. This was the exact opposite of what Michael and Lauren had planned. With morale through the roof, I turned my attention to something even bigger, the Collins retail contract. See, Michael, brilliant strategist that he was, had let that deal sit untouched, too busy planning his failed coup to actually run the business. The Collins executives were getting impatient, and if I didn't act fast, we risked losing the biggest deal in company history. So, I flew out to meet with them personally. I sat across from their board and laid everything out, much like I had with my own employees. I told them how Michael had neglected the deal, how he had tried to sabotage the company they were about to invest in, how he had been removed. And then I promised them something. "I built this company from nothing," I said, my voice calm but strong. "I've never failed to deliver. If you put your trust in me, I promise you won't regret it." They signed that afternoon. A multi-million-dollar contract, locked in. Parker Designs wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. And Michael? Michael had officially lost everything. A week later, the news broke. A well-placed leak, not from me, of course, winking face, made its way into the industry press. Articles surfaced about how Michael Parker had attempted a hostile takeover of Parker Designs, how he had been forcibly removed, how his unethical business practices had cost him his career. Lauren wasn't spared either. Her name was dragged right alongside his. Suddenly, those cushy executive roles they thought they'd walk into? Gone. No one in the industry wanted to touch them. I heard through the grapevine that Michael had been begging old contacts for a job. Any job. But no one wanted to associate with him. He had made too many enemies, burned too many bridges. As for Lauren, she vanished. Completely. I suspect she realized her little power move had backfired so badly that her only choice was to disappear. But I wasn't completely done with Michael yet. I had one last thing to take from him. Our divorce. He had been expecting a long, bitter fight. A chance to drag me through court, to demand a payout, to make my life hell one last time. But he forgot something. I was smarter than him. See, Rachel had already been working on the financials. And after proving Michael had used our joint assets to fund his little coup attempt, he walked away with nothing. No house, no alimony, no shares, nothing. He tried to fight it, of course, through one last pathetic tantrum. But when the judge saw the financial records, He signed the papers and walked out of the courtroom with his tail between his legs. It's been 6 months since Michael and Lauren tried to take Parker Designs from me. 6 months since I took it all back. Parker Designs is bigger than ever. Profits have skyrocketed, employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and the Collins deal has put us in a position to expand into new markets. Michael? Last I heard, he was struggling to start his own firm. He tried pitching to investors, but with his destroyed reputation, no one would give him the time of day. Lauren? No one's seen her in months. As for me, I've never been better. Because at the end of the day, you don't betray the woman who built an empire. Unapologetic success. For me, life had never been better. For Michael, it was an absolute disaster. Let's start with his attempt at starting his own business. Because, yes, of course, Michael thought he could just walk away and build something of his own. Classic narcissist move. He had scraped together what little personal savings he had left, called in every favor, and tried to start a luxury consulting firm targeting high-end fashion brands. Too bad no one wanted to work with him. See, the fashion world isn't that big. Everyone knows everyone. And when word got out that Michael had attempted to steal his wife's company, committed corporate fraud, and been publicly disgraced, well, let's just say no one was returning his calls. The investors? They weren't interested. The brands? They laughed him out of the room. Even his old business school contacts, the ones he thought were loyal to him, wanted nothing to do with him. One former investor even told a mutual acquaintance, "I wouldn't trust that man to run a lemonade stand." I wish I were making that up. And then there was Lauren. Ah, sweet, delusional Lauren. For the first few months after being fired, she still clung to the idea that she could land another high-paying job in marketing. She sent out resumes, networked aggressively, even tried to start her own brand strategy consulting service. It went nowhere. Because here's the thing about being a known corporate backstabber. No one trusts you. She had been branded, rightfully, as an unethical opportunist, and every time she got an interview, someone in the industry would quietly warn the company. She tried to sleep her way into a hostile takeover and failed. Do you really want that kind of mess in your office? By month 4, she was completely out of options. By month 5, she was out of money. And by month 6, she had vanished. I don't know where she went. Rumor had it she moved out of the city. Some people claimed she had tried to land a job in a completely different industry. Others said she had been living off some poor, unsuspecting boyfriend until he wised up and dumped her. But as far as I was concerned, she was irrelevant. Lauren had walked into my company, thinking she could steal my career, my business, and my future. She walked out with nothing. I would have been content to let Michael fade into irrelevance, but oh no. He just had to make one last, desperate attempt at dragging me down with him. See, after his business failed to take off, after investors laughed in his face, after every single connection he had abandoned him, he did the one thing that truly pathetic men do when they run out of options. He tried to sue me. That's right. Michael actually thought he could take me to court. His claim? That I had wrongfully removed him from Parker Designs and unfairly taken assets that he was rightfully entitled to. It was so laughable that even my lawyer, Rachel, who had seen just about everything in her career, couldn't believe he was serious. I wish I could tell you the lawsuit dragged on and turned into some dramatic courtroom showdown, but honestly, it was over in 2 weeks. Because Michael had no case. The documents were airtight. The paper trail of his fraud, his embezzlement, his attempts to push me out? Unshakable. The judge threw it out immediately. And the best part? He was forced to cover my legal fees. Which, given that he was already bleeding money, was the final nail in his coffin. After that pathetic lawsuit failed, Michael completely crumbled. His so-called business empire had collapsed. He had no job, no prospects, no credibility, and worst of all, no one to blame but himself. His friends? Gone. His business school network? Silent. The investors he once bragged about? Now treated him like a joke. And let's not forget the divorce. After signing those papers, he walked away with nothing. No shares in Parker Designs, no alimony, no financial safety net. I walked away with everything. And Michael? Well, last I heard, he had moved back in with his parents. Yeah, the man who once sat at the head of my boardroom, trying to strip me of my company, my power, my future, was now living in his childhood bedroom, unemployed, broke, and completely humiliated. He tried applying for lower-level jobs at smaller companies, ones that might not have heard about his little corporate scandal. But even those places didn't want him. Because once you show the world that you're a snake, it doesn't matter where you go. People remember. As for me, Parker Designs flourished. The Collins deal took off. We expanded into 3 new markets. Profits soared. Employee satisfaction hit record highs. I wasn't just surviving without Michael. I was thriving. And the best part? I had proven that no matter how hard someone tries to take you down, no matter how ruthless they are, no matter how much they underestimate you, if you play the long game, if you keep your head up, if you plan your moves carefully, you will always win. And they will always lose. Because at the end of the day, Michael never understood one simple truth. You don't take on a woman who built an empire and expect to survive. 1 year. It had been exactly 1 year since Michael and Lauren had walked into that boardroom, smug and arrogant, thinking they were about to erase me from my own empire. 1 year since they signed their own downfall. 1 year since I took back everything they tried to steal and built something even greater. Parker Designs wasn't just thriving, it was dominating. The Collins contract? A huge success. Our products were now featured in every major high-end retail chain in the country. Profits had doubled. Investors were lining up to work with us. And the best part? I had just closed the biggest deal of my career. A massive expansion into the European market. It was a multi-million-dollar contract that would turn Parker Designs into a global brand. I was standing in my office, overlooking the city skyline, glass of champagne in hand, when my assistant, Claire, walked in with an envelope. "This just arrived for you," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I think you'll want to see it." I took it, opened it, and nearly laughed out loud. It was an invitation to a corporate networking event, hosted by none other than Michael Parker. Oh, this was going to be good. Now, let me set the scene for you. After losing everything, Michael had spent months desperately trying to claw his way back into the business world. No one wanted to hire him. No one wanted to work with him. But, like a cockroach, he just wouldn't die. Somehow, he had managed to scrape together just enough connections to host an event, trying to position himself as some kind of industry expert. The irony? The event was focused on business leadership. The man who had literally tried to commit corporate fraud and had been publicly humiliated for it was now pretending to be an authority on leadership. I had 2 choices. I could ignore it. Or I could show up. Guess which one I picked? The event was being held at a mid-tier hotel downtown, not exactly the kind of prestigious venue Michael used to frequent. I arrived fashionably late, stepping into the room with absolute confidence, dressed in an elegant black designer suit that commanded attention. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Because everyone knew who I was. I wasn't just the CEO of Parker Designs anymore. I was the woman who had destroyed Michael Parker. And then? I saw him. Michael was standing near the stage, pretending to be engaged in deep conversation with a small group of attendees, probably the only people who still took his calls. His smile was fake. His suit was slightly ill-fitted, like he hadn't been able to afford a proper tailor in months. And the moment he saw me, he went pale. I smiled, walking toward him slowly, taking my time, enjoying the way he shifted uncomfortably. "Michael," I said smoothly. "What a surprise." He forced a tight smile. "Emily, didn't expect to see you here." "Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, glancing at the event banner behind him. Business leadership in a changing market? Interesting choice of topic. Considering, well, I gestured vaguely, letting my implication hang in the air. One of the attendees, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, frowned slightly. "Wait, I know you. You're Emily Parker." She turned back to Michael, suspicion creeping into her tone. "Didn't you?" Michael rushed to cut her off. "Emily, if you're just here to stir up drama." I held up a hand, feigning innocence. "Michael, I'm just here to support a fellow entrepreneur." That was a lie. I was here to ruin him. One last time. I spent the rest of the evening casually mingling with the guests, subtly dropping facts into conversation. How Parker Designs had just closed a major European expansion deal. How we were projected to hit record profits this quarter. How we had just won an industry award for Best Executive Leadership. All while Michael stood in the corner, stewing in silent rage. By the end of the night, half the guests had left early, no longer interested in whatever pathetic wisdom Michael had to offer. Because why would they listen to him? When I was the real success story. As I was leaving, I turned back one last time. Michael was standing alone near the bar, drink in hand, miserable. So, I walked up to him, lowered my voice, and said, just for him to hear, "You should have known better, Michael." Then I walked out. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Michael never recovered. His consulting business flopped within months. Investors pulled out. The few clients he had dropped him when they realized he was all talk and no results. He disappeared from the industry entirely. Last I heard, he was working in a small accounting firm doing basic bookkeeping. As for Lauren, no one knows. She vanished. Maybe she changed careers. Maybe she changed her name, I don't care. Because they don't matter anymore. As I write this, I'm sitting in my penthouse office, looking out at a city where Parker Designs is now a dominant force. I rebuilt. I thrived. I became stronger than ever. And Michael? Michael became nothing. Because in the end, I didn't just win. I erased him. So let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can steal, manipulate, and betray their way to the top. You may think you're winning. But when you play dirty against someone who built their empire from the ground up, you don't just lose. You get destroyed. And me? I'll be toasting my success for years to come.